Hi everyone, welcome to We Belong Education podcast. Today I'm with my favorite co-host Helen. And Helen, we have a guest today, Mr. Declan from BU Happiness College. How are you doing, Declan?
I am well. I'm very excited for this conversation. It's very rare that I get to be on a show with co-hosts, so there's three of us. I'm hoping it's going to be a little bit chaotic, but also a bit insightful.
Yeah,
That's my hope.
we love chaos in this one. Um, if I may introduce Declan to our listeners, Declan is a founder of BU Happiness College, and since 2017, that college has been is providing happiness to his members, and according to the study, increasing the members' happiness by 57% within the first 12 months of attending or engaging with BU Happiness College. Declan has been a podcast presenter, masterclass conductor. He has been on a keynote presenter for many establishments, and we are very, very lucky that Declan was able to provide some time for us. So, Declan, we are so happy that you're here, and we're talking about happiness. So, it's
Must be doing something right already. That's a good sign.
yes, sir. Declan, I have you know, Helen and I have been talking about how do we do this? What perspective do we bring to our audience? And most of our audience who listen to this podcast are educators who are working really hard in providing quality education to children. Parents attend listen to our podcast, and many of our friends too. And so when we talked about happiness, how happiness could be seen in many ways. You have social perspective, psychologically looking at it, spiritually, individually. Something that makes me happy may not make you happy. So how do you um, define happiness, or can it even be defined? Up to you, Declan.
Yeah, look, it's a big question and a good question to open with because it's a question that we have been debating as a species for about 3,500 years, give or take. So I'm going to do my best to answer a 3,500-year-old question to really kickstart today's conversation on this podcast. So the question is, how do we define happiness? What does it even mean to be happy? And you're right in saying that, first and foremost, I do not believe there is a one-size-fits-all answer to that for 8 billion people on the planet. However, we do know that there are some common themes and threads. So we know from the research in positive psychology that there are a few common things that we can pull on that tend to lead to a happier life. And these are applicable to any culture, background, spirituality, experience. They're really what unites us as human beings. So for anyone who is familiar with positive psychology, you may have come across the PERMA framework. These are the pioneering models that came out of this field of research, going, what are the common themes or common ingredients? If we were to say, a happy life is like baking a cake, what are the ingredients that need to go into the cake? And so if we break it down, it's an acronym, PERMA, and then there's a H that's been added recently. So I'm going to add that in too. The first one being positive affect. So if we want to live a happier life, what does happiness actually mean? Well, first and foremost, we need to look at doing things that give us positive affect. And if you're not a science-minded person, or if you're like myself, when I was first going into the field of research, I went, what does that even mean? I feel like I've asked what does happiness mean? I'm just getting jargon thrown back at me. It basically means do things that help you feel good, which you might sit there and go, wow, what a surprise, mind-blowing revelation. If I want to feel happier, do more things that make me feel happy. But the amount of times I speak to audiences about that, and we go through the whole model, and then afterwards I go, hey, which one or two of the points in PERMA do you undervalue, underappreciate, and underprioritize?
Hmm.
And people go, it's actually the first one.
Hmm.
I get so caught up in being busy in life. I get so caught up in all my other responsibilities, being a great educator, a great parent, a great partner, colleague, or friend. I forget to carve out time in the calendar to just do stuff that feels good for me.
Mm.
And so as much as it's simple and I still chuckle when I teach people, I go, oh, wow, like do things that make you feel good and you'll be happier. I think there's some, profound wisdom in the simplicity of that, of we
Yeah.
do need to prioritize it. We need to make room for it, right?
Mm.
So that's the first thing I'd say. The second one, if we look at the PERMA model, engagement and flow, do things that make you lose sense of self and time. Those moments where you're so absorbed in something in a positive way. So
Mm.
afterwards, we normally feel a sense of accomplishment or meaning from it. So I'm not talking about when you go, I'm just going to quickly check my emails or my social media, it will be like 5 minutes. And then before you know it, 2 hours has gone by.
Yeah.
Not the same as engagement and flow, right? We want to do it in a way that feels really good. So for some people, it's a creative expression. For some people, it's the meaning and purpose in their work. For some people, it's sport, it's being in
Yeah.
nature, but find things where you lose sense of self and time. Really important one.
Mm.
Third part of this very long-winded answer to an age-old question of what is happiness. The R, and I'm going to stress this so much because the longest running study on happiness that we have, the Harvard longitudinal study on happiness, found this is the number one contributor to how happy we feel later in life.
Okay.
Relationships.
Mm.
The quality of relationships we have with other people is profoundly impactful on how happy we are, particularly in later life. They found like above nutrition, above whether or not you're a smoker, above exercise, the number one contributor to your health and happiness later in life, how strong are your relationships with others?
Yeah.
The reason I want to stress that for everyone listening is it's been about 10 years now that we've been seeing a rising trend of loneliness and
Mm.
isolation and disconnect
Mm.
in our societies. And so on one hand, we've got all this research coming out going, other people are critically important to happiness. And at the same time going, but we're less connected to other people. Despite social media making us more quote unquote connected than ever
Connected.
before,
Mhm.
right? We're more lonely. So I think we're lacking depth in those connections. We need to
Mm.
reprioritize that. If I go to point 4, which is the M, meaning and purpose. So this is do things that feel meaningful and purposeful to you. I don't mean you have to answer the big question of what's the purpose of life, although if you can, go for it, right? It's more, does the things that we do day to day feel meaningful in some way? Does it feel
Mm.
like it matters in some way? And if you can inject that into your work, oh, even better, because we spend a lot of hours at work. Fifth point, which is our A, achievement and accomplishment. Are we doing things that challenge us, but that feel like achievements and accomplishments? Are we setting goals that matter to us? Are we pursuing things? I think that one, it's important, but I've noticed in myself and in a lot of people, we can sometimes overvalue it at the expense of the other four.
Mm.
So like we're chasing the next accomplishment, we're chasing the next achievement, we're chasing the next thing for happiness, going, it's an important part of happiness, and it is. But if it's coming at the detriment of are you doing things you actually enjoy? Are you in the moment and being present? Do you have good quality relationships? And does
Mhm.
it feel like meaning and purpose? Okay, well now we're starting to maybe get the bad end of the, the short end of the stick. We're not getting a good
Yeah.
trade-off there. And then our last point in PERMA, which has actually only been added recently, it wasn't in the original PERMA model. When positive psychologists like, right, what is happiness? What are the common threads that everyone should look at? And then they can put their own spin on. Like how you do positive affect is going to be different to how I do it. What gives you engagement and flow is different to what gives me engagement and
Mm.
flow. But what are the common themes? They found those 5 and went, we did it. Dust our hands off, happy days, high fives all around. Well done, we've solved the 3,500-year-old question of what is happiness. And then recently they started going, we missed a critical point. And that's the H that they've added on,
Okay.
which is health,
Mm.
right? They went, hang on, we've looked at happiness only through a mental and emotional lens,
Mm.
but it's not impossible, but it is harder to
Mm.
feel happy and well and fulfilled and like you're flourishing if you're hungry. I'm sure we've all had hangriness moments, right? I've been hangry before. If you're underslept and underrested, right? If you're not hydrated and eating well, right? And moving our body in healthy ways, we know all the research that exercise is so beneficial for our mental, emotional, and physical well-being. And so they went, you know what? We cannot separate the mind from the body. We cannot separate our physical well-being from our mental and emotional well-being, and we cannot separate health from happiness.
Yeah.
These have to come together.
Mm.
Wow.
That's a lot.
It's a lot to take in, but there it is. If everyone wanted, you know what? If you just there, I'm not going to say do this, but stop the podcast now. We're done. Like we're
Yeah.
done. There's the 6
Done.
points for happiness. Go do them. I'm sure we'll have many more enriching talks in this conversation, but let's start
Have
with a
you
big one.
I've actually got some non-academic research, which I can just add to some of those points you had.
Please do.
Within my work at Three Bridges, not that I do this, but we have social groups for elderly people. And there is an amazing lady. She is a 108 and still living independent. And at her 108th birthday, which I attended, the question was asked of her, because again, like let's just take that in 108 and still living independently. They
Mhm.
said to her, how have you got here? What have you done? And her few main points, which maybe she's read the PERMA study and she's just checking them off, because her main points were that she never stopped being social and that she also prioritized exercise. And and to me, I think I think sometimes we forget that, I think sometimes we make it hard, and some simple things like let's exercise and also let's make sure we're still being social, because I mean, we talked about this when we did our emotional well-being podcast. I talked about the fact that I didn't do well a while ago, and the worse I got, the more I withdrew.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this, if you're 108 and still living independently, there's some research in itself.
Massively so. I mean, hats off to it. That's amazing.
And I'm recording this podcast from a hotel, and as I was using the lift to borrow this pen because I'm absolutely not well prepared for this podcast, I saw there is a gym in level 1. So I think after this podcast, I should use it. And those who are listening, maybe you can try doing that too. As you were speaking, and I looked at the as I was writing the points, the first one that you mentioned about positive affect, it is like how I see why you might be compromised. Is it, do you reckon that it is easier to look after the other than to look after yourself at times? Is that what comes in the way of because we are so critical of ourselves? We think, hey, I would miss my multivitamins, but I would never miss my dog's medications. Is that what you reckon, Declan, that may come in, one of the factors maybe?
Yeah, I think it is a factor to it. It does feel easier to prioritize the needs of others ahead of the needs of ourselves.
Hmm.
And part of that, I think, is this social conditioning that a lot of us, I hope, have been raised and taught to not be perceived as selfish. And now this is going to sound very weird from someone who's dedicated their career to studying happiness. And I know I joked a moment ago. I said, pause the podcast now. We're done everything. Do not pause the podcast straight after what I'm about to say, because I'm going to leave you with a weird message if you do. I wish more people were selfish.
Hmm.
Don't pause the podcast. Don't leave me. Let me explain what I mean. I don't mean in the traditional selfish sense. Now, traditional selfishness is my happiness first at the expense and detriment of other people's happiness and well-being.
Hmm.
We don't need more of that in the world. By God, do we have enough of it?
Hmm.
What we need more of is what we call healthy selfishness,
Hmm.
which is I will prioritize my needs, my happiness, my development, my fulfillment, my sense of flourishing for the benefit of those around me. And I'll unpack that further and say, well, why is that a benefit to prioritize your needs and how does that serve others? I would imagine everyone listening to this podcast can look back and relate to the saying that when we are chronically stressed, overwhelmed, emotionally exhausted, at wit's end, not looking after those elements of perma, not feeling flourishing and fulfilled, we've probably acted in some ways that we look back on and go, oh, that was not my best self.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes I even refer to it as we get to the end of those big weeks of work and our loved ones get what's left of us rather than the best of us.
Hmm.
It's like, I've got this much left to give you by the end of the week. And my God, am I not being the best husband or, partner or parent or friend I could be had I got a little bit more in the tank? And so we know this, right? And I speak on all these stages and I go, hey, think back to a time when you were feeling fulfilled and flourishing and thriving. And you're like, oh, I'm really feeling like my best self. What did you do? The vast majority of people, and research backs this up from positive psychology, they call it the pro-social effect of happiness.
Yeah.
When people feel good and look after themselves, they're more likely to be kind, generous, giving with their time, attention, and resources, altruistic. It spreads this positive ripple effect. When people feel good, they want to do good things.
Yeah.
It's really beautiful. And then in an analogy level, we know this. I often say to people, when we go on a plane, they say at the start, in the case of an emergency, an oxygen mask will fall from the ceiling. And, then they say, make sure you run around putting everyone else's on before you put your own on. Otherwise, you're terribly selfish and you're a bad person. Right?
Yeah.
Everyone goes, wait, that's not what they say. I go, of course, what do they say? They go, put yours on first and then help others. We know that in the case of emergency. My invitation to people is to not wait till an emergency in life to start doing that.
Hmm.
Hang on, if I prioritize my well-being, if I prioritize my happiness, if I prioritize my happiness skills and learning about the skills and science of happiness, it will enable and allow me to make a more positive impact to those I care most about.
Yeah.
And that's the ripple effect of happiness in action.
Yeah, that's quite profound in terms of, and I absolutely appreciate the fact of social conditioning on how looking after oneself could be seen as individualistic in otherwise collectivist ideology, where you would say, well, even if your head is hurting, come to work because the work needs you, and think about what effect you can have to in at work. But now, since more and more of these self-care conversations are coming in, hopefully people can look at self-care not from that self-centric or selfish point of view, because you distinguish what that healthy selfishness may look like. And I hope that people can look into it. And educators, for example, like we talk about educators a lot in this podcast. We have emotional well-being sessions that are available on the documents, and we educators foster emotional well-being, or they're expected to. But it is not a requirement that organizations will provide emotional well-being sessions for educators. It's a choice. It's some maybe there are educators out there who say, hey, Saurabh, would you mind doing this? Or Helen, can you do this? Or Declan, can you do that? But it's not a requirement. So it feels like maybe this needs to be more available awareness, from the context of awareness, that people can then say, hey, here's a choice that we can make. What do you think, Helen? Because I
mean,
talk about that.
this is a really timely conversation. So I thank Declan for putting up on his LinkedIn that he wasn't going to say no to podcasts for a 2-week period, because we were lucky and we got in. And Declan, was it we're so far third on your podcasting mega event.
Yes.
But it's really timely because educators are always spending so much time, making sure that children's needs are met and being really responsive to the children they look after. It's very easy to forget ourselves. And so, and it does sound weird when you verbalize. It's like, how can you forget? Like, how did you get to burnout? How did you ignore yourself for so long? But the fact of the matter is, way too many of us, and I say us because I've already shared with our listeners about my journey in burnout, is that suddenly you just realize you're there, and you're like, okay, yeah, when you're reflecting, you go, oh, there were signs, but you're suddenly there and you're like, oh my goodness, we're at crisis point. So I think that, like, this is it. I think there's a balance here. Like, yes, they sound very easy to do. Let's prioritize our health. Let's exercise. Let's find things that make us happy. But also, let's recognize that sometimes it's not so easy because we get caught up in our jobs and our lives, and we're very busy. And I know all too often when I managed a large team, I was too busy making sure everyone else's oxygen masks were on before my own. So, yeah, I don't want anyone that's listening to us to feel bad and go, oh, they're making it sound like it's easy. But I can't find it easy. I think that's the hard thing about this is it's not, if it was easy, we wouldn't be talking about it.
Yeah, I'm a big believer when it comes to the skills of habit, because I want to highlight here, like, those parts in the PERMA model, right, of what constitutes a happy life. They're kind of like the big milestones, the checkpoints, the big frameworks. But at BU Happiness College, the social enterprise I run, we teach 70 distinct skills for happiness.
Wow,
70 distinct skills that we know from the research are more likely to lead to people feeling better in themselves and in their life. And in doing so, then spread a ripple effect to happiness. So I like to say, a lot of my job, I'm not the world's best or leading, happiness researcher and academic. I think what I do quite well is translate what happens in academia into something that's practical and pragmatic and relatable and understandable. And my goal is always to be, how do we make the science of happiness simple, but not easy? To your point, you know what I mean? It's like, it's simple. It's like, this makes sense. We can look at it and go, oh, of course. But the implementation of it, the ongoing practice, as I've been studying this and working on this space for over 10 years, and I still have plenty of weeks where I stuff up and I go, you know what? I've completely neglected part of the PERMA model for myself this last month. Okay, now we notice it. Now we get back on track.
And also, as Declan, as Helen was talking about these 5 points, or when you mention these, and people may think it is superficial, but then there, as you mentioned, that there are 70 distinct skills to learn. But by bringing this conversation up, even though it might have been there in your mind, but now it's a structure, although superficial, let's say, and we will create depth as we go, or when they attend the BU college, it allows you to ask the right question. It's like when you write these points down, you go, okay, what question am I asking today to myself? Have I looked after myself? But if you don't even know, you won't go into the inquiry of it. There's no quest to look for it. And while I'm speaking, I just want to take an opportunity here that I mention educators, but parents are in the same boat. When they Helen here has her own kids, and also she is a very important educator in our lives, and therefore she has a huge team that she looks after, but also her family. So, and I have two dogs. So absolutely, but they have their ways of taking know you in my life. Yeah, I absolutely appreciate the value of looking at it. You also mentioned something about relationship as one of the core ones. I was looking at a recent study, and I want to draw parallels, if that's okay. And the parallels were about, from the children perspective, that the number one reason for, if you were to draw a connection between childhood and adulthood, the number one reason for children to have maladjustments, or adults to have maladjustments in later life, was peer withdrawal, as in not able to make relationship with their peers in childhood, or lack of friendship in childhood. Presence of one good friend diluted that peer effect, or the effect which caused by peer withdrawal. And we see that because we still struggle in getting into peer culture, accessing peer culture, making friends. And I would love to know your views of what your observation has been in the world where we are apparently so connected. Why is friendship so tough, or making friends tough?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I'll actually talk a little bit from my own experience on this because, so for context and background, my father's lifelong career in the military. I think he's coming up to 42 years of active service. So we moved a lot.
Mm,
I was at a new school every few years growing up, particularly in primary school years.
mm,
And looking back now, I've come to realize that what that led to was a really unique skill set and then a really unique gap in my skill sets. I
okay.
became really good at very quickly making surface level connections and friendships. I learned how to be charismatic. I learned how to be funny. I learned how to be, I look back on it now, I call it my years of being a human chameleon. Like I could be whoever I thought someone else wanted me to be if I got their approval.
Mm-mm.
Mm,
And that worked really, really well for the purpose of I could seemingly just be the guy who could make friends with anyone really quickly. But what I massively lacked was depth in those friendships.
Yeah.
I lacked spaces where I could be authentic and vulnerable and have difficult conversations and really be true to myself. And actually, I look back now and go, that's a lot of that's what led into me studying positive psychology and the science of happiness, was because I went to one of my first mentors, one of the first people I looked up to as almost a big brother to me.
Mm,
And he said, "What do you want? Why are we having this conversation?" I was about 19 at the time. And I said, "Oh, I want self-confidence, self-worth, self-esteem, self-trust, self-care." Like I rattled off all these things that would have been nice to have more of in life. And he went,
yeah.
"Okay, interesting. All of those start with the same word, which is self.
Mm,
Tell me about Declan." And I went, "I can't. Like I don't know what matters to me. I don't know what my values are. I don't know what I care about. I don't know what my goals are in life. I don't know, what boundaries I have. I just don't know myself."
mm,
mm,
And so as a result, it was really hard to form authentic and genuine depth in connections. Now, where I think I see that play out, a similar experience to what I had, is these days. Now, I've got a much younger brother and sister. They're 16 and 14 years old.
okay.
And I've watched them go through, like, that was around the same chapter of my life where I was really struggling with that. I'm watching, and I'm seeing similar things play out, but now we're magnifying it in the landscape of social media,
mm.
Right.
where we can be a human chameleon so much more easily and so much more readily. We can portray whatever we want to portray of ourselves, hide whatever we want to hide of ourselves. We can very quickly chop and change relationships and friendships. If one doesn't work out, we'll just join another forum online and another interest group. And so I'm seeing kind of similar to what I was grew up with, going, "Oh, well, that's because I changed schools so often." I'm like, "Oh no, that's happening now in the digital landscape that we're being raised on." We're seeing this generation of children being essentially raised
Mm,
online, like very tech savvy and digitally connected. What encourages me that I'm only seeing very recently, and by very recently, the first exposure I had to this was about 3 weeks ago. I went and visited my younger brother and sister. And I went, "Oh, is this just them or is this a trend?" I started looking online and be like, "Oh no, this seems to be a trend, something." They're deleting all their social media platforms.
Mm.
by choice as teenagers. And I went, that's so odd. And I was like, why? The 16-year-old in particular, my sister, she was like, oh, I just find I have better conversations with friends when I'm not on it. And I went, oh, they're doing it. They're repairing. The world is healing. Like, this is amazing to see. And I started looking up the research, and there's these trends of some schools and some areas in New Zealand they were doing it where they're I'm going to say regressing. They're returning to dumb phones. Like instead of having smartphones, we've
Yeah.
just got phones that just text and call like what we grew up with.
Yeah.
I mean, I heard them. I literally was in a conversation about this yesterday and heard them referred to as punishment phones. But same
Love
thing,
that.
because
Yeah.
all they do is call and yeah, call and I think they text as well, but no social media or anything like that. Another interesting one I've heard that's happening a lot, and I think maybe the reason I bring it up is because I think adults could actually get something out of this, is turning off notifications on your apps, because you control when you look up at the apps. The apps don't control when
Love
you
it.
look at it. And I think a lot of we know I have a house full of young adults. There's this thing about you control when you look, it doesn't tell you.
Yes.
And I think that's an amazing one, because how often do we go, oh, hang on, I've just got a message, I've just got to check. Whereas if you've turned off all your notifications, it's more purposeful if you do decide to interact with that app. And I think and the reason, like I said, I'm bringing it up is I think us as adults could actually get quite a bit out of that, of just turning off notifications.
And I think what that leads to your point, is like it leads to intentionality. If we're
Yes.
going to go check the notification, do it with intentionality, be present with it. And that's what I'm starting to see, and what I hope to see more and more and more, not only in this generation that's coming up now, but also in us as adults,
Mm,
being so much more intentional with
mm,
our relationships. Because that, looking back, that was what made a difference for the surface level relationships I'd built growing up to the
Yeah.
relationships that I now have. And I owe a lot to my wife for this. I started dating my wife when I was 19 years old, and her highest value and one of her greatest strengths is connection. She's fantastic at forming depth in relationships.
Yeah.
mm,
And I remember when we were first dating, she's like, "Oh yeah, I go to my dad's house once a week to have family dinner still, and we all just catch up about what's happening in our life." And I thought she was psychotic. I was like, "Are you really?" Like, I come from a family that if we caught up a few times a year, that was fantastic, right? And at first, I was like, "Well, this seems remarkably inconvenient." But the more I did it, the more I was like, "Actually, this is really nice." There is intentionality to we carve
Yeah.
out this time to be present together. It doesn't always go well. Not every dinner is sunshine and rainbows, but we have intentionality to show up together and do the messy work of forming real human to human relationships. That's what we all need a lot more of at the moment, is intentionality in doing the messiness of relationships.
Yeah,
mm,
and I also wrote another word right under this, as right under relationship, as you were speaking. And since you've been speaking about forming connections and listening to Helen, the word authenticity comes up as well, an authentic, genuine relationship. But also the word that I wrote under relationship, as I was learning from you about the PERMA model, was loneliness. And now many a times loneliness could be seen as a physical loneliness. Like if there's no one in your proximity, maybe you're lonely, or maybe you did something which led you to do that, or you lack a skill to engage in peer culture, and therefore you are physically loneliness. But I also then thought, while we were talking, is in absence of that authentic relationships, even though you are surrounded by other people, and as you just mentioned that, who am I, Declan? I mean, who am I? Well, I understand all these concepts about self, but who am I? That there is a sense of loneliness cognitively, just within yourself, even though you are surrounded by so-called lots of people talking to you at a dining table. Um, so yeah, it's kind of there are so many sides of it, and but again, asking the right questions once you know what topic you are talking about, because we have educators and parents who many a times they work, they give so much, and then but the place they have in society, sometimes it's hard for them to communicate what sort of day they had, because the
mm,
identity that educators have is not of very high value. Sometimes parents have shame associated with their problems. They may not be able
mm,
to even ask those questions to people. And perhaps when they go home or when they and therefore we have this podcast to kind of create this community where they know that they are not the only lonely ones. We two loners are always making this podcast for them, but there's a sense of loneliness in society because it's hard to share what you have with you because others may not understand, or even if they did, they may not appreciate that
I
thing.
think just to piggyback off that, so we've talked a few times about that shame and that we don't always like openly admitting, hey, I'm not doing that well, or hey, I'm lonely. And I like this new concept that Declan has added for us now to talk about. And I think that shame we talk about can be interlinked with that being selfish in that in a positive way. We're talking about
Yeah.
selfishness in a positive way of if we could get to that place where actually it's okay to be like really real and honest.
Yeah.
That is a really, I think that could be positive in our selfishness to just kind of be more open to say I'm not doing great, or because I know, like as I said, the worse I got, the more I withdrew. And if I had just been okay to come out to a few people and go, hey, I'm really not doing well, could have probably curtailed a few things. So yeah, I just wanted to add that one point in because we have talked about this weird feeling we get about being a little bit, if we spend some time thinking about ourselves or reflecting about ourselves personally, it's like weird and selfish. So
Very good point.
yeah, I like this.
Love
I
it.
like
Love
where
it.
this is going.
And I'll touch
Positive
on that and say, like,
selfishness.
yeah, I'll say on that, like, my goal is not to have, the people who listen to this conversation or everyone just become like navel gazers, you know what I mean? And spend their whole time self-reflection, 24 hours a day going, what makes me happy? Who am I? But my goal is, actually, I'll share this because I think it was really beautifully touching. I've been running the Happiness College now for 8 years. And it was only in the last month that someone shared with me that I was like, that's why we do what we do here.
Okay.
Talking with one of our members who's in their junior year, so they're at their third year of the college. They've been working through those 70 skills, learning, developing. And they said, they came onto a call and they said, hey, I want to be honest with you. I came very close to just canceling today's call. I went, interesting. Tell me more about that. Why is that? And they said, oh, there's just so much on. The kids have this with school and then I've got this with work. And they kind of rattled off this massive to-do list, which was very understandable, very big. I was like, yeah, that is a big week ahead of you. So why prioritize this hour here? They said, you know what? In a life that is so busy and demanding and overwhelming at times, this is one of my sacred spaces to reconnect with myself for a moment.
Mm.
And if I did nothing in this session but show up for myself, even if we didn't say anything or learn anything from this session, if all I did was say, no, this is an important way of me showing up for me and me just reconnecting with myself and looking inwards for a moment, then that's worthy.
Mm.
And I went, wow, like that is, and in essence, yeah, that's the point. It's sure, it's cool to learn about all the skills and science of happiness, but I think what's even more valuable is going, I'm actually spending time with myself, right? I'm reflecting on myself. I'm checking in on these elements of PERMA. I'm checking in on my definition of a happy and successful life and whether I feel I'm living in alignment with it. That act of just for an hour a week, when people come to the college, I say, hey, our minimum expectation is you prioritize this work for 90 minutes a week, whether that's in a coaching session, in a group learning, in the online resource hub, working through the curriculum, whatever it is, 90 minutes a week of spending good quality sacred time with yourself, working on the skills that lead to a happier version of yourself. That's the minimum expectation. Now, if you can't make yourself a priority for 90 minutes a week, we've got to have a whole nother conversation. But if you can, I'm promising you, it's not just good for you, it's good for everyone around you as well.
And how good it is that somebody recognizes the value that they're adding to themselves, because again, it goes back to the first point. It's easier to do something for others, but it's sometimes really difficult to do something for ourselves and not feel, as Helen said, ashamed about it or not feel something selfish about it. Because your podcast, this particular podcast, is right after the podcast that we've just discussed together on emotional well-being,
Perfect.
and Helen had mentioned something about her own sleep routine, and that's what the hate when it came to the last bit about the health, and I wrote big word sleeping and next to Helen, because now when I struggle with sleep, I think about Helen to think what did Helen do to sleep better because of these timings. Sometimes you have to catch a flight and all that. So you mentioned that this health has the H has recently been added, and I'm sure a lot of reflection went in there. What's your immediate when this was added? How did you see it? What was your initial reaction, and what are you finding that since that has been added to the PERMA model?
Yeah, look, when it was announced that that was being explored by a lot of the leading positive psychologists who were doing that research and updating the PERMA model, I kind of looked at it and went, "Oh, this makes a lot of sense." And to be honest, the feeling I got was almost like a moment of like, "Oh, we probably should have caught this earlier." Like, how is it that we went, you know, as a as a scientific modality and field of study, we launched this after years of research. We've done it. We've solved what happiness is. There's these five elements to it, and then a few years went by, and we went, "Shoot, we really overlooked health. That was number six." But I'm glad we did. And what that's also exciting because it shows that, science isn't perfect. It's an
Mm,
experiment, it's curiosity, it's exploration. I think there's something really cool about a whole group of researchers
mm,
going, hey, let's study what makes life worth living. Let's study what makes people happier and more fulfilled. Let's study how to make better workplaces, better societies, and see what comes of it. And then as a result of all that work going, here it is, we did it. And then a few years later going, actually, we missed something.
yeah.
I think that's really cool. Like for me, it alleviates all the pressure to get everything right straight away and perfect straight away and go, this is an unfolding, this is an exploration. Selfishly as well, I saw it from the sense of, my background was I actually did my undergraduate degree in health sciences. So my background
Yes.
was in nutrition, dietetics, physical health.
Mm.
That was my, academic origin. And then I went into my postgraduate studies in positive psychology. So for me, it was like a merging of worlds. I was like, oh, good. Those, the 30 grand of student debt in the first 3 years of uni wasn't for nothing. It's nice to see it all come together.
Well,
I feel
if we also just want to add, because I really am keen to always just really support, especially our educators that listen to our podcast. If scientists are missing the fact that health is important in happiness, don't feel too bad when you've neglected your own health.
Tell me about
'Cause,
it.
I mean, Saurabh jokes about, it's a bit like when you said at the beginning, for happiness, you can find something
Do
that makes
things
you
that make you
happy.
happy.
A
Yeah.
bit like, duh. Well, the same thing when I was really struggling last year with my own mental health. And then I went and did, it was actually a nutritionist who spoke, and she was saying, I don't even talk about food because if you're not sleeping, your body's full of cortisol. It's not going to help, blah, blah, blah. So I went on this journey of learning about sleep routines.
There you go.
Changed my life. But that again is one of those things. It's like, oh dear, Helen, of course, if you sleep, you're going to feel better. Of course, when you weren't sleeping every night and running off, say, an hour every night, you were not in a good way. But it's that thing of just reaffirming to our listeners, if researchers of happiness missed the health thing, don't feel bad about yourself as well, because hey, researchers missed it first.
Yeah, and maybe this is your chance to go, okay, interesting. Maybe I now do something with it, but I do something with it imperfectly. Right?
yeah.
Like I'm such a big believer of anything that we learn about the skills of happiness, use as a point to go, okay, well now I'm going to experiment with it.
Yeah.
And experimenting means I'll probably stuff it up along the way,
Mm.
right? Like when we learn about discovering your core values, when we learn about productivity and high performance
Yeah.
habits at the college, when we teach people about, we have a whole section on sleep science. When we
Mm.
teach people about
Yeah.
everything I teach, I'm like, hey, what I want you to go do is go experiment with this imperfectly now.
Yeah.
Have
Mm.
a go with it. Have a play. See what happens. See what sticks, what lands, what doesn't. Because what I don't want to have people do is set themselves up for, oh my God, that guy who was on that podcast about happiness said there's 70 distinct skills for happiness and I need to master all of them to
All
be
of
happy. Oh, that sounds exhausting. That's not the goal. The goal is play with them, experiment with them. Over time, you'll get better. And as a result, you tend to feel happier.
Two,
Mm.
two thoughts are crossing my mind. Firstly, in aligning with what you said, that if scientists could let go of the forget the health thing, then we can too. But it also tells me that they didn't go five is done because it just fits really well by telling people, hey, look, this is my five fingers, it's done. But they went, no, no, hang on. We need to keep researching. There isn't an end to it. We are evolving. So that's a really good confidence in the structure itself, that we are in a vehicle which is always in researching and developing. So that's a really good point. And when you talked about that 70, I also thought, oh, 70? Okay, how about we do zero then? Because my really good mentor, a friend, has often said to me, Saurabh, with you, it's nothing or everything, isn't it? So, but when I look at the things that I have successfully done in my life, it was in between nothing and everything. And the things, the projects which are empty, they were the ones which I never started, or started with a lot of motivation and lost it along the way. So that's something which I really appreciate about that, started with imperfectly. Just start somewhere and see how it is going. And the last thought which is crossing my mind was, when I hear all of that, when I hear these words which we have heard before, but we haven't put them in a structure, or we don't know where to start, where to end, or who to ask help for. Now we know.
There's a
Discipline.
college.
There's a college. Discipline is a word which comes to my mind, as in, you know, taking time for yourself out. Yeah, I got it. No, are you gonna do it? When are you gonna do it? Discipline, accountability towards yourself. That's that keeps it's resonating with me at the moment when I hear about the model and our execution of that model, discipline. Mm. Um,
I actually have a question, if it's okay to ask, Saurabh. We know my bestie is ChatGTP. Oh, besides you, Saurabh, my other bestie is ChatGTP. And when I knew we're having Declan on, I've been following him on LinkedIn for a while. I knew he was the happiness college guy, but like, who is he? So I quickly chucked in yesterday into
Oh,
ChatGTP,
I'm
who
curious.
is Declan
Yes.
Edwards? And one thing that jumped out at me in everything that came out was that you do mindfulness based stress reduction.
Yeah, MBSR. Yeah.
And but so that led me also, because in our episode 6 where we talked about emotional well-being, we did touch on mindfulness, but we didn't get to an end. So I'm really curious to hear your thoughts around mindfulness. What is it? How do you do it? That I might have just extended our podcast by a couple of
by two
hours,
more
but
hours.
I was interested. Seems you're here joining us about your thoughts around mindfulness.
Mindfulness, yeah. So you're spot on, and ChatGPT is spot on. I'm surprised that I knew that about me. That's cool. So one of the 5 modalities that we use at BU Happiness College is mindfulness-based stress reduction. So positive psychology is one, mindfulness-based stress reduction is another, and then there's 3 other fields of research that we build our curriculum and our coaching around.
Okay.
I added MBSR probably about 5 years ago now, specifically because I wrestled with mindfulness for so long in my happiness journey.
Okay.
Everywhere I was going, people were like, you should try mindfulness, do mindfulness. Have you tried meditating? What about this meditation retreat? Have you tried yoga?
Mm.
And I became so resistant to it because of it. Like, I cannot tell you the level of petty stubbornness that I had to go, yes, I've tried meditating. It's not for me. I hate it. And then the more I looked into the research, the more I went, okay, either I'm being petty and stubborn here, or about 90% of people who've dedicated their careers to studying happiness are wrong.
Mm.
What's more likely? And I
Mm.
went, maybe I'm being petty and stubborn. So I went, okay, why do I not like mindfulness? That's because I felt like I wasn't good at it. I went, well,
Mm.
why do I think I'm not good at it? Well, one, my definition for it was that I needed to empty my mind. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah,
Mm.
my mind can't be quiet. That's why I
Yeah,
feel like I can't do it.
mine's very active, right? And
Yeah.
so I was told this idea of meditation and mindfulness is having a quiet, still, silent mind.
Mm.
And mine was anything but.
Yeah.
And so I went, oh, I'm doing it wrong. I'm not good at it.
There's a hallelujah choir out there listening to this podcast right now going, yes, that's me.
Yeah, right. So the first thing I had to do was actually change my definition for what is mindfulness. And I remember coming across this great YouTube video by a Buddhist monk, and he was saying, "Hey, we can be mindful when crossing the street. We can be mindful in a conversation with someone. We can be mindful with our food. We can be mindful when sitting. Like mindfulness is not sitting, cross-legged in Buddhist robes under a waterfall with our eyes closed in lotus position. Mindfulness is simply the act of awareness and presence.
Mm.
Are we aware of what's going on in our mind and in our emotions and around us? And are we present with them? If we do those 2 things, that's mindfulness. I would argue that for most of this conversation we've had, I've been very aware about how I'm feeling, what I'm thinking, what you guys are saying, and I've been very present with it.
Yeah.
Therefore, I'm already, right now in this moment, engaging in an experience of mindfulness. Right? Now,
Yes.
all of a sudden, mindfulness becomes a lot more accessible if we define it by that way. And the second thing I had to realize was mindfulness, like any other skill, is something we need to practice at, and we're going to suck at first.
Hmm.
Right? I've never met someone who was like, right, time to learn the piano. And they sit down and they go to play and they sound terrible and they go, playing the piano is not for me. I suck at the piano. Of course, you haven't practiced. Or someone who goes, I'm going to learn a language. And they open Duolingo, they do 3 lessons and they go, can't speak French yet. Time
Well,
to
I'm
give up.
really disappointed that, you can't just put a mindfulness quote on the fridge and then it's done.
I know. If
Like,
only.
why? Come
If
on.
only. That would be perfect. Right. And so for me, I had to go, okay, A, I need to change my definition of what mindfulness is and what's successful in it. B, I need to be willing to suck at this for a while.
Hmm.
And so off I went, spending a few years avidly sucking at mindfulness,
Yeah.
going, I'm going to try to be more aware of my thoughts and feelings, and that's a skill in and of itself. I'm going to be try to be more present with what's going on in life rather than always chasing the next thing and rushing to the next thing on the to-do list. Also another
Mm.
skill in itself. Now, let me tell you now, my wife loves this. One of the places that I most experience mindfulness, awareness, and presence, hand washing dishes.
Hmm.
Sounds crazy. Sounds
Can you talk
crazy.
to my husband, please?
Yeah, right. Now, this is the thing
Especially
I
in
love.
winter, especially in winter.
Oh, just the
It's
tactile
just,
experience of it.
yeah.
I physically can't be using my phone because my hands are in soapy water.
Yeah.
Like,
Wow.
I love it. Now, I get next to nothing out of other things that bring people mindfulness. Like, I don't really get much out of drawing. I've tried mindful drawing. It's not really for me. So, like, again, like the skills of happiness and the approach to happiness, define it for yourself. With mindfulness, anything you do where you feel aware and attuned to your thoughts, feelings, and what's going on
Hmm.
around you, and you're present with what's going on, you're being mindful. If you
Yeah.
get that while you're going for a walk, love it. If you get that when you play music or listen to music, love it. If you get that when washing the dishes, hats off to you. I'm the same.
And
Wow.
others love it too when
Yeah.
you do it. Yeah. With awareness and being present, aware of your own physiology, thoughts, feelings, and being present. And just one of my mentors was talking about mindfulness, and he mentioned he was putting a cup down, and this is in a temple back in India, and he was putting a cup down, and he says, "Did you see how I put my cup down?" And he was just putting the cup on the table. It's like I just did it mindfully, just slowly putting full attention into putting that cup down. And I'm like, oh, okay, I just want to live here for a few more days so that I can put my cups down properly at home. Because the number of times you lose things, you
Mm.
forget things, you go, oh, I was just about to go, but now I don't have my keys and I'm locked out, is because at that time you weren't in that moment. You were thinking about taking the dogs out, throwing rubbish in the bin. And these are small moments where I saw myself when you were talking about mindfulness, being aware of what you're doing, because there's not little voice in my head. There's a chaos about
Mm.
what all is happening, and we have to like bring it to that. Now I am very mindful of the time that I said that I would take of yours. We will take, and we have taken way more than that. But let's say I'm one of the listeners of this podcast. I'm enjoying the conversation. I'm liking it. I know that there are ways to ask questions and who to ask questions. How do we get started? How would you, is there a motivation to start? Is there a discipline to start? Is there a small step that they can take to bringing more happiness in their life? What would your recommendation be moving forward to those listeners?
So I think first and foremost, I would encourage everyone to have the paradigm shift and to accept the paradigm shift that I've offered in this conversation. That A, happiness is important, not only for you but for everyone else around you. B, that when we prioritize happiness and we work on it intentionally, we enable ourselves to spread a positive ripple effect of happiness. Like we can all play our part. Like our vision at BU Happiness College is to grow global happiness. And I
Mm,
have no hesitation in saying I cannot do that directly. I
mm,
can't shape the happiness of the world just myself. It's when
mm,
people learn these skills and these tools and practice them that they spread a ripple effect. And then I get to be real cheeky and count all their lives and their friends' lives and
mm,
colleagues' lives towards my tally, right? So, A, happiness is important, it's a priority. B, doing so is a good thing for everyone else around you. And C, it's a skill. Like you
mm,
can work on it, right? And so if you do nothing but leave this call and go, okay, time to get curious about the skills and science of happiness,
mm,
and whether that curiosity leads you, to me and to BU Happiness College or to anyone else. Like I'm very open with people that I don't think anyone, including myself, has, the perfect approach to happiness for 8 billion people on the planet.
mm,
I know a lot of people love our approach that we do at BU and some don't resonate with it, and that's okay. right? Find the approach that works for you and then follow through on that. Like allow that curiosity and that intrigue to guide you. I do believe inside all of us, there's a little compass that nudges us towards the right things.
Mm.
We just need to slow down enough and be mindful enough to recognize and to tune in and go, huh, something really struck me in that conversation. Something really landed with me and resonated. Maybe that's worth exploring further.
If I had a huge highlighter right now, I just really want to highlight so our listeners can really take this in that we've got Declan. His profession is revolves around happiness, and he's even said himself, sorry, say it again. Your mindfulness journey took a few years, sucking
Yeah.
at it for a few years. And I think that one I think about that a lot. You know, you're right. Oh, you're like today, this week, oh, that's it. I'm going to be mindful. And then, you forget about it tomorrow. Like, okay, meh, oh,
Yep.
that's it. I'm done with being mindful. I think that message of, it's okay to restart and restart and restart. And if it's years later, hey, the happiness guy was still trying to find it years later. He now washes the dishes, but years. It took years, not a week, not a month. I suppose, and we spoke about this in our emotional well-being podcast, just really accepting it's a journey,
Yeah.
and it does not have to be a perfect journey.
Yeah. Don't be
Yeah.
like me, either nothing or everything. Just start somewhere and get in touch. Get in touch with us, get in touch with Declan, because there is a structure, there is a community, because doing it alone that's what we are fighting, the loneliness. So sometimes we are fighting loneliness by being lonely. So maybe you can find your tribe, your clan. You can find people who are, and I'm sure there are people out there who are in similar boat. So Declan, is there anything that you would like to add? So I want to say to our listeners, because I'm absolutely appreciative. The points that I've taken, I'm going to refer to those points and also go to the gym today.
Love that. I love hearing it. Look, the only thing I'd add is just my deepest gratitude to both of you for inviting me on the show for a couple of reasons. I said before that our vision at BU Happiness Coach is to grow global happiness, and I fundamentally can't do it alone. I would be hard pressed to think of a better group of people to teach the skills and science of happiness to than educators and parents in terms of the potential ripple effect that that has on society. I think the possibility and scope for positive impact by helping and working and supporting that group of people is second to none, to be honest. So, as someone who is about to become a parent for the first time myself, as of about 2 weeks from now, at the time of recording, so at the time of listening, I'm probably dealing with the brand new stages of having a newborn at home. I just think there's such a beautiful opportunity that we have to set a foundation for the next generation that's coming through, to spread this ripple effect to the people around us and to our communities that we exist within. And in doing so, all of us get to play a part in growing global happiness. So thank you both for welcoming me here. Thank you to everyone who's listened and taking some time out of their day to listen to this. And if something I said does spark that curiosity, of course, I'm assuming you're a podcast person if you're listening to this, because you're listening to a podcast. So I'd love to invite you over to my podcast, How to Be Happy, which you'll find on all the podcasting platforms. Every Wednesday, we share skills and science of happiness, tips, insights, strategies, techniques. So if you're like, I do want to learn more about that, there's a free way to go do it. And
Amazing.
I might be extra cheeky as well and give a little like inside scoop for you guys. So I've just finished writing the 50,000 word manuscript for my upcoming book on the skills and science of happiness.
Wow. Wow.
Thank you. After
Congratulations.
3 years of research and study and writing, and speaking of doing things imperfectly and starting again, the process of writing this book has been that. But we are now opening it up for early waitlist. So if you're like, hey, something resonates with me here, I would like to learn more about the skills and science of happiness when that book comes out, I'll share a link so we can pop that in the show notes as well.
Amazing. Before we let you go, though, I just want to quickly ask something, because to some people, college can be an intimidating word. Like, college is learning and, school a bit ill. For anyone that's listening and they're like, well, two-prong. If they're an educator, like, oh, actually, I'm interested to find what this happiness college is, or say they're a people manager and like, oh, maybe I want to get this happiness guy to come out. I suppose my first question is, kind of, what is a college journey for someone that wants to join, but also what is some things that you offer, say, to workplaces? Can you just give us a quick rundown before we let you go for the day, so we don't leave people wondering what
Of
what it is?
course. Yeah, of course. And thank you for bringing it up. Yeah, so the reason I landed on calling it a happiness college was because fundamentally I realized that my career was dedicated to teaching people skills that led to them being happier human beings.
Hmm.
And
Mhm.
I think traditionally, it's changing now, but really for the last 150 years, our education system arose from the Industrial Revolution and was built around how do we teach people the skills to be good employees,
Yeah.
Mm.
which important, it serves its purpose. But I think we're now seeing a shift towards humanistic skills, soft skills,
Yeah.
skills that lead to better human beings
Yeah.
who are also good employees,
Hmm.
right? And good business owners and leaders and parents. So I remember saying to my wife at the time, she was my fiance, so it's wild to me that she chose to still marry me after pitching her this. We were traveling through the US on holidays. This was 8 years ago now, and we got back to LA, next to no money to our name because we'd spent it all traveling. And I went, "Hey, I think I want to quit my job when we get back to Australia." She said, "Oh, what are you going to do?" And I said, "I think I want to open a happiness college." And I don't know why or how, but by the time we landed in Sydney, she went, "You know what, stuff it, go for it, have a go." And we've now built that into a college that has members and graduates in 5 countries, and
Wow.
partners with organizations around the world. In terms of what that looks like, so there's a self-study program that a lot of people come to the college to do just for their own learning. So it's for their
Mhm.
personal and professional development. We call it the happiness blueprint. So
Hmm.
they enroll for either a 3 month term or a 1 year enrollment, and they learn
Mhm.
things like emotional intelligence. They learn things
Yeah.
like self-awareness. They learn things like goal setting and vision,
Hmm.
all in this
Amazing.
really nice online platform. And then other people go, "Hey, I actually want to work with someone." So it's kind of like having a coach that they meet with twice a month to hold them accountable, push them out of their comfort zone, keep them on path, and also take them off curriculum. There's a lot of time when we're working with people, our coaches go, "Hey, look, the next skill we teach in the curriculum is this, but I want to jump you ahead to this one because that's more relevant to your journey right now."
Perfect.
Mhm.
Perfect.
That makes it a bit more tailored.
Mm.
So that's the program that has members and graduates in 5 countries. And alluded to at the start, we actually measured a few years ago how much people's subjective happiness goes up by, and in their first 12 months of enrollment, it goes up by 57%, which we're really
Mm.
proud of. And
Mm.
then with organizations, we started going, well, if we care about growing global happiness, we need to care about how people feel at work because we spend a lot of
Mm.
hours at work. How can we help organizations measure, understand, and prioritize happiness as a strategic competitive advantage? So that's
Hmm.
everything from we do workplace happiness surveys, where we anonymously survey staff and build a
Hmm.
whole workplace happiness strategy for organizations.
Yeah.
We
Mm.
have workplace happiness learning and development initiatives where we come in and teach things like humanistic leadership, burnout prevention and management. We
Perfect.
Mhm.
teach these skills that are really well applicable to organizations and workplaces that
Hmm.
elevate the capacity of their team to co-create a happy
Yeah.
workplace. It's
Hmm.
not just the responsibility of leaders and managers, it is a co-shared responsibility.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
okay, just also, if people want to get in touch with you about any of these things, how do they find you?
Um, uh, so I've actually been told recently, well, you just told me, search ChatGPT apparently, like I just pop up. But also someone told me recently that if you search that happiness guy on nearly any platform, I pop up, which is hilarious to me. So you can search Declan
Perfect.
Edwards, or you can search that happiness guy, and I'll just appear,
That
um,
happiness guy,
like
I'm
some little
trying it right
wizard out of a
now.
lamp. Um,
And that is that's how I wrote your name, Declan Edwards, and it showed up. So that's one way that people can find. I want to also thank Helen here because I want to give her the credit because in all these travelings and all that, and many a times I on purpose do not look at social media because I feel thin sometimes doing it. But Helen brought it up, and I said, Helen, like, hey, Saurabh, look at this opportunity, and she always does that. So those who are listening, many of the good ideas, if they are coming out of my mouth, they might be coming out because Helen put them there first. So it's an thank you, Helen, for doing this and bringing Declan. Now, Helen, did you find that? Did you have you were
Can I
Googling?
just confirm? Well, first I spelled it wrong, so did it work first? Because we know I can't spell. But then when I fixed my spelling, that happiness guy, when you type that, your Instagram comes up straight away, and then there is a website, that happiness guy, which I don't think is you. But then also your LinkedIn is at the top. So yes, correct. When you type that happiness guy, there we go. That works. Wow, we're
Yeah, they
learning
have to
new things.
spell correctly though. Guy spelling, you must have a GUI, okay? Make sure that you spell
No, I
those
spell
words.
happiness wrong.
Okay. Of course you did. I knew. Oh,
We
I
know
thought
I
you
can't
misspelled the
spell.
guy spelling wrong, the GUI. Just confirming that with you. But thank you very much. I have said thank you, what, 50 times now. We love what we're doing here, and we like to leave this for our listeners, and then we also love the guests who come, and thank you very much for coming in, sharing your wisdom, sharing like a pathway for many of us to explore. Because if you don't know, you don't know, right? So, and Helen, thanks for fostering this connection. And we often say this, Helen, no matter what topic podcast we do, we often say, "Oh, we need another one of this." So we might need you again, Declan, when we realize that it's been a year we haven't thought about ourselves. We need someone to hold us accountable.
Send me a message. I'll put it in the calendar now for 2026.
Yeah, but look after yourself, Declan, and thank you for providing us with such a deep insight in such a limited, within an hour you gave us so much of insight. And Helen, thank you for being a champion. From We Belong Education podcast, Declan Edwards being our guest, I would like to say goodbye and look after yourself and the people you love. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks.
You don't need to be